Good afternoon. It's about 1:15, 1:20, Wednesday, October 21st, 2020. And if you're a movie nerd like me, this is Back to the Future Part 2 Day. Of course, October 21st, 2015 was the fateful day Marty McFly and Dr. Emmett Brown, along with Marty's girlfriend Jennifer, traveled to Hill Valley, California, and on October 21st to stop his son Marty Jr. from committing a crime or something with Biff Tannen's grandson. I've forgotten what they were going to do. I think it was a burglary or robbery or something. But anyway, if you the first Back to the Future, Claudia Wells played Jennifer Parker, who was Marty's girlfriend, and Miss Wells had to leave acting in 1987 or 88 as her mother had cancer, and she was not able to come back for the sequels. And they cast Elisabeth Shue to play Jennifer in part 2 and part 3. And Elisabeth Shue had been in a couple big films, Adventures in Babysitting, and Cocktail, and of course The Karate Kid. The first one with Ralph Macchio, the only one, in my opinion. I don't really care for that Jaden Smith, Jackie Chan remake or whatever. And interesting thing I think about the movie is, a lot of things changed, in the alternative future or present 1985 that Marty comes back to at the end of the first film. His parents are successful. His mother's not an alcoholic. His brother Dave is wearing a suit and he's going to the office. This could only apply two things in 1985: that he was either a lawyer or a mall executive. There was a mall in Hill Valley, and Biff Tannen is a little wimp. Has his own car detail business, but pretty much is kind of more or less George McFly's bitch. And considering that Biff is a rapist, that's probably a good fate for him, other than being in prison where he is also a bitch. So, but getting back to the point of which Elisabeth Shue, it's a small role, but Back to the Future Part 2 was probably, next to Ghostbusters 2, probably the most anticipated inevitable sequels of the 1980s. So being in this film probably was a good career move for her, even though it was a small role. She pretty much sleeps through half her scenes. And but one thing I've often thought that may have been an unintentional plot point was that we never do hear her last name, her maiden last name. And the second one, they call her Jennifer McFly when she's in the future, when the cops find her sleeping in the alleyway. Of course, she's married, and women sometimes take their husband's surname. But maybe it's a totally different Jennifer in the alternative, more better alternative for Marty in Back to the Future, when his parents are more successful, but they're still living in that weird little neighborhood that doesn't make sense, but they have better furniture and a better lifestyle. But you think about it, how common the name Jennifer is, or how common it was in 1985, and how fashion trends, women, young teenage girls, women, usually try to dress the same, even though they don't want to wear the same dress to an occasion or a function, whatever. But I can understand that. But has anyone ever thought that maybe this is a totally different Jennifer? I mean, maybe that something bad happened with the Claudia Wells Jennifer, and Doc Brown knew this. I mean, there's a total bunch of fan theories circulating all over the internet about how the beginning of Back to the Future, the 1985 and Back to the Future at the beginning, is actually an alternative Back to the Future. So it's an alternative to an alternative when he comes back at the end, and that means that when Biff takes a sports almanac book back to 1955 to create in 1985, which he is powerful, that's an alternative to an alternative to an alternative. It makes no sense. I mean, there's like fan theories galore, and I'm not going to get into those. I know people have said that, that there's several of these Marty McFlys roaming around the multi-universe in the movies. So, has anyone ever thought about that? Seriously, I'm sorry, my sinuses are acting up today. It's just Oklahoma weather. But another thing, I think I wasn't really too impressed with the Back to the Future Part 2 when it first came out, because it was so anticipated and they spent so little time in the future. But I think it's kind of ingenious now, because half the freaking movie is set in 1955. So half the movie of a sequel is set showing us scenes from the first film. There's often a cliche that most sequels are just retreads of the first one, but I think this kind of takes it to the meta level that, hey, you know what? We're going to show you the same thing from the first film, but we're going to show you different scenes from different angles. I remember somebody once said that if you go back in the first Back to the Future movie, you see a man riding a bicycle in the background when 1955 Doc Brown is doing his weather experiment with the DeLorean, and his costume is the same thing that Doc Brown's wearing in the second film. The older Doc Brown, who's gone back to 1955 with Marty, and that's kind of a nice little, probably an unintended thing. People have said that if you watch it, you can see a man on a bicycle flying through the town, and Doc Brown rides a bicycle wearing a hat and a coat in the second film. But I have other theories I've heard about that I'll expose in other videos. But I often thought that was kind of a weird that often in sequels a lot of actors are recast, but maybe the recasting meant that there's a different Jennifer. Marty has found another Jennifer at Hill Valley High School. Well, maybe she even goes to another high school. We don't even know. But think about it. But if you're a teenage girl, 1985, Marty McFly, Michael J. Fox, handsome man, parents are wealthy, wouldn't you, driving a big-ass truck, wouldn't you just want that? Wouldn't you want to be his boyfriend? So, anyway, there's other fan theories I want to touch on here in a little bit, but that's one I've often thought was kind of interesting, that maybe it was all intentional.